Hello, welcome to a new edition of the Right Wing Populist Podcast. I am the Right Wing Populist. So today I want to talk about the question of how popular is President Trump really? Do people perceive him as doing a good job, a bad job? Is he underwater worse than you would expect from a president in his second term? And what does that mean for 2026? And the reason I want to talk about this is I saw this post from Lakshai Jain, I might be saying his name wrong, so my apologies, who is the co-founder of this election and a political analyst site called Split Ticket. And I've known who this Jain guy is for a while. He pretends to be this objective election analyst when in reality he's pretty much just a Democrat hack who tries to use data that he likes to make predictions that Democrats will do well in every election ever. And he dismisses polls that aren't favorable to Democrats, even if they're more accurate, like Trafalgar, Atlas Intel, Richard Barris, a Big Data poll. So I've never liked this guy. I just sort of view him as a Democrat hack who tries to pretend like he's objective. Sort of a worse version of Nate Silver or Greg Elliott, for example. But he had this post yesterday that went a little viral, and I just thought it was so stupid. I'm going to read the post, and then we're going to discuss why I think it's stupid. Quote, spoke to Greg Sargent about how people don't really get that Donald Trump is the most unpopular first-term president in modern history, and this time for the economy, rather than the perceived abuse of office. These are very bad political waters for a president. End of quote. Okay, a couple things. First off, Trump is not a first-term president. Okay, he's not. This is his fifth year being president. It's been 9 years since he was elected the first time. The idea he's a first-term president is stupid. Now, I get it. He's serving a non-consecutive term. I understand that. It's a new administration. That's true. But he's not a first-term president. Okay, he got reelected. He didn't get elected for the first time. He got reelected. Again, this is his fifth year as president. The idea that he's a first-term president just because he's serving a non-consecutive terms, in and of itself, is just a stupid idea. Look, you can view it that way, but it's misleading. So, him just framing it that way it just again shows that he's really a partisan deep down. And so let's compare how Trump is doing compared to other presidents in their fifth year. So if you go at Real Clear Politics, which is the gold standard for the polling aggregates, right now, Trump's at 45% approval. At this point in history in Obama's second term, he was at 44.5%. And at this time in history in 2005, Bush was at 43.8%. So both presidents around October 1st in their second term, the first year of their second term, were actually both Obama and Bush were lower than Trump is. Not by a lot. The numbers about the same for all three of them. So Trump is not much more unpopular at all. In fact, he's actually slightly more popular than both Bush and Obama were in their second term. But let's pretend Trump's a first-term president. Okay, let's just pretend he's a first term. We'll go with this fantasy that this Jade guy wants to go with. And let's compare other presidents to the first year of their first term. Let's look at Biden. Biden, at this point, around October of 2021, so within the first year of his term, Biden was only at 43.4% approval. So Biden was still lower than what Trump is, even if you view it as a first term. Let's look at Trump himself during his actual first term. Around October of his first term, Trump was only at 40% approval. So even if you compare Trump to the last two presidents, which does include himself, I understand that, and you pretend he's a first-term president, he's still higher than both Biden and himself. Again, the fact that I even have to compare him to himself shows the fact that he's not really a first-term president, but let's put that aside. So the point is, he's not a first-term president, but even if you compare him to the last two administrations that were in office, Trump is still higher right now. Trump is higher than he was at the beginning of his actual first term back in 2017. He's 5 points higher, according to Real Clear Politics. He's actually a little bit higher than both Bush and Obama were during the first year of their second term. So this idea that Trump is extraordinarily unpopular, like this Jane guy from Split Ticket is saying in this post, it's just dishonest. He's not a first-term president. He's a second-term president. His approval rating is about the same or even higher than both Bush and Obama during their second term. And even if you consider him a first-term president, he's doing better than Biden. He's doing better than himself. Now, it is true that Obama's first-term approval rating is higher than Trump's is, if you can pretend Trump's a first-term president. But he's not a first-term president, and Obama had so much goodwill because the Bush administration ended in such a disaster. Any president was going to have a high approval rating for a while, coming after Bush. So, again, now look, he's Trump. If you actually want to look at Trump's approval rating just in a vacuum, not comparing him to other presidents, it's not very good. I mean, he's at about 45% approval, 52% disapproval, and that's been increasing the last couple of weeks. So I'm not saying Trump is like extraordinarily popular. He's not. He's a somewhat unpopular president, not by a lot. 7 points is not a big split, and that's common for a president in his second term, close to being a year in. That's normal. But I'm not disputing that Trump isn't like relatively, broadly speaking, unpopular. He is somewhat unpopular. And, we've had more jobs numbers coming in. The economy is very fragile right now. There's no question about it. We have more people looking for jobs than jobs are available. That's a really bad sign. That can often be a sign that we are headed to a recession. Wages have been stagnant. The economy is very fragile. And that could, and that's the problem when you do big actions like tariffs. Like, even if the tariffs aren't responsible for the economy slowing down, people will make the connection that, oh, you did something different and the economy's not doing so well now, therefore it's your fault. The reality is the economy was weak when Trump got into office. That's why he won. The Biden economy was terrible. And they were faking the statistics, as we just found out. Much of the Biden numbers were fake. That's why, you would see these good jobs numbers, and yet if you looked at the polling, everyone said the economy sucked under Biden. They weren't buying the propaganda bullshit that the economy was doing well. The economy wasn't doing well. So, but let's talk about the midterm. So, right now, even though Trump is about what you would expect for a second-term president in his first year, that's not actually a good sign. Even though I'm sort of defending Trump right now, that's actually not a good sign for the midterms, because both Bush in 2006 and Obama in 2014, they both got wiped out in the midterms. Wiped out. So even though Trump's not doing as badly as the dude from Split Ticket is trying to pretend, he's still not doing well. And the question is, why is Trump relatively unpopular? A lot of Republicans listen to this podcast, so they may not be aware. But let's talk about why he is underwater. Because he started off at the beginning of his second term, above water in terms of his approval rating. Now he's below water. Now, again, caveat, that's normal. I'm not saying Trump's doing anything especially bad. This is what happens with presidents. But that doesn't mean there isn't a reason. And I would say there's basically 2 reasons. Number one, war with Iran. That was just a very stupid thing for Trump to do. A lot of young people, particularly young men, viewed that as, Trump just being a neocon, one of the things that distinguishes Trump from other presidents is he's not a warmonger. Trump's instinct is peace, not to go to war. So when Trump bombed Iran, it made Trump look like a sort of a typical Republican or even Democrat president, to be honest. I mean, Obama was just as much a warmonger as Bush was in a lot of ways. So this isn't really a Republican or Democrat thing. But that's what made Trump seem so different was Trump's first instinct isn't to bomb people. It's to try to get a peace deal. He wants peace. Trump is not a warmonger. His instincts is for peace. So when he bombed Iran, when it really wasn't in our interest, it's really in Israel's interest. So when you bomb a country for the benefit of another country and not the United States, you could actually see in Real Clear Politics or around when he bombed Iran is when you saw his approval really started to go in a negative direction. The second reason is the economy. Like I said, the economy is fragile. You haven't seen a significant increase in prices with the tariffs like many people predict. However, People already thought prices were way too high. Again, another reason why Trump got elected and won the popular vote, the first time Republicans won the popular vote in 20 years. And while we haven't seen a significant increase in inflation, there has been some inflation in some consumer goods. And again, we have more people looking for work than jobs that are available right now. That's just a bad combination. And I'm not blaming Trump overall for the economy. This is I still call it the Biden economy. Or really, to be really fair, it's the COVID economy. Because a lot of the economic problems still stem from the fact that we decided to shut down the economy because of a bad flu season. And somehow we thought there weren't going to be any long-term consequences to that. Of course there were. And we spent all this money, and Biden deserves a lot of blame because Biden spent a shit ton of money after he got into office with all these crazy spending bills. But Trump also spent a lot of money for COVID back in, 2020. So I'm not even Trump, you could say, has some blame for the inflation. I would blame more Biden, but even Trump, you could say, have some from his first term. So this is really the COVID economy really coming back to bite us in the ass. That's the reality. Now, what can Trump do about the economy? I'll say this. Stop and end the war with Russia, okay? Every time, or really, stop all these wars. We don't want oil prices to increase. When oil prices increase, energy costs go up, and, that's when, prices for everyday Americans go up. Energy is a big thing when it comes to inflation, When energy costs are high, things cost too much. Even just look at the gasoline pump, for example. And when you bomb Iran, when you escalate with Russia, oil prices go up, energy costs go up, and people really start to feel it, man. Cost of living will go up because of that. Energy costs are just vital to, when it comes to energy and inflation and all that stuff. It's just vital. So stop escalating with Russia. Stop, because it does look like Israel wants us to get into another fight with Iran again. You could look at, we're giving Israel these missiles and weapons, it appears, getting fighter jets ready. It looks like the United States getting ready to get into another conflict with Iran, which would just be a political disaster. We don't want that. So we'll see. So those are the two main reasons Trump's approval is underwater. Again, it's pretty much what you'd expect for a second-term president in his first year. But, the economy is not doing that great. It's very fragile. And Trump can't be a warmonger. His instincts are not to be a warmonger, but he cannot get... And these two things are connected, as I'm saying. If you go into these wars with Iran and Russia, energy prices will increase, and it's going to hurt your everyday American more because they're going to feel the energy prices increasing. If nothing else, just by gasoline prices going up. So it's a problem. These are fixable if Trump could just avoid these. He needs to end the Russia-Ukraine war. I thought Trump was going in that direction, but I think he said yesterday he was willing to give Ukraine these missiles that would give him the ability to strike into Russia. Like, what the fuck? Don't do that. We shouldn't be involved in this war at all. You want to escalate with Russia? This Ukraine thing is of such importance to Russia, Ukraine, for their national security. I think Russia would be willing to use nuclear weapons if it really came to it. And giving Ukraine offensive weapons that can strike into Russia, if Ukraine actually did that, if we allowed that to happen, nuclear weapons, I think, are on the table for Russia. That's how serious I think they take this as a national security threat. NATO and Ukraine. It's, he's got to stop listening to that stupid General Kellogg. That dude keeps telling Trump that, Russia's this close to economically failing and that they're going to have to stop the war. It's nonsense. Russia's not doing that bad economically speaking. These secondary sanctions haven't worked. No, regular sanctions haven't worked. Russia's economy, because these countries are still buying Russian oil regardless. Europe won't put any sanctions, or, Europe's refusing to stop buying Russian oil, even though Trump's saying, I'm not going to put on these heavy secondary sanctions, even more secondary sanctions, without, Europe stopping buying Russian oil, but Europe's not going to do that. So the Russian economy is not doing that poorly as people in the West are trying to make it out to be, and they're winning the war. So why are we getting more involved? Why are we sending Ukraine? Why are we talking about sending Ukraine these offensive weapons? Stop funding Ukraine at all. Tell Europe and Ukraine you have to accept Russia's demands, broadly speaking, because they're winning the war. And the people who are winning the war get to set, they get to dictate the terms of peace, the side that's winning. We won World War II, so we got to dictate what Japan was going to become afterwards. Same thing with Germany, the first and second. The people who win the war get to dictate the terms of peace, even if the people that have won the war are the ones that escalated or started the war. Now, I think they're the ones who really escalated this into a war, but, people disagree with that. Even if you think it's Russia, it's like, okay, but they're winning. So, anyway, I don't want to we'll talk more about the Russia-Ukraine war the next podcast. But, so yeah, bottom line to this podcast, Trump is not as unpopular as a lot of these left-wing political commentators are making it out to be. He's actually slightly more popular than you would expect from a president in his second term. But he's not doing well enough for, I think, Republicans to keep the House. I mean, their House margin is so thin. What is it, 3 or 4 seats? Trump's going to have to be closer to 50-50 for Republicans to have a fighting chance. The real test of Trump's popularity, if you don't believe any of the polling, the real test will be the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey. Both those states were states that Kamala Harris won by about 6 points. Which, in New Jersey, that was great for Trump, great for Republicans, because New Jersey is a state that Democrats usually win by 15 or 16 points. So it was about a 10-point improvement. So the fact that Trump only lost by 6 was awesome. In Virginia, it was like 6 or 5. That was decent. I mean, Biden won Virginia by 10 in 2020, so that was about a 5 or 4-point improvement. They have off-year elections in New Jersey and Virginia, and they have big governor's races. And the tell for me is, if New Jersey particularly, but also Virginia, if the races are 5 points or less, even if the Democrat wins, that's a great sign for the Trump administration. Because that would mean there's not much movement against Republicans. In fact, there's some movement for it. If it's about 6 or 7, that's not a win or an L. That's not a W or an L for Republicans or Democrats, because that would be, that would mean the same. If anything, if it's about 6 or 7, that would still be good for Trump and Republicans, because that would mean that the country hasn't shifted that much left at all. Now, if it's 8 or more, double digits certainly, that's a good sign for Democrats, because that would mean that those states have moved to the left since the presidential election, and that would be a sign probably for how the midterms are going to go. So that's if you don't believe polls, which I don't blame you, polls are very, sporadic and inconsistent and lots of times inaccurate. So if you don't believe in polls, the real test for Trump's popularity will be the governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia. It looks like the Republican in New Jersey, his name escapes me at the moment, but it looks like he has a real shot to win. So if the New Jersey race is just close, if it's within 3 points, again, New Jersey is a Democrat state. So if it's within 3, let alone the Republican winning, that's a great sign that Trump's actually that people, generally speaking, approve of his job. Now, if let's say the Republican wins, but then in Virginia, the Democrat wins by 10, that's kind of a mixed result. I would still view that as more of a win for Trump, because again, just the Republican winning the governor's race in New Jersey would be awesome. But again, if you don't trust the polling, the way to sort of test or to see how popular Trump really is, it will be those governor's races. So keep an eye on that, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's the podcast for today. Sorry for the little bit of the vacation. I had stuff to do, but I appreciate it. Please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It looks like the website will be coming back as well. I'll let you know when it does. And thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye.